Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 minutes of honest advice, tips and resources. I'm Trudy J and I am here with
Shah Barrett.
I'm Cheryl Phipps.
And Wendy Bella.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. So it's a wet and windy, wild day in the
Wild
New Zealand.
summer's day. Just
Nice
Summer's day.
alliteration there.
Yeah, I know. I was like, it just came out. That's just the
Natural,
gold that comes out of my mouth.
You're a natural. What can I say?
I'm happy to see the rain.
Very
Yeah.
happy.
The hills
It's
are
been-
looking really brown.
Yeah.
Mm.
Over
Yeah,
40 days without rain, we've needed it. And it's very
Mm.
unusual in New Zealand not to have rain.
Yeah, I looked at the weather watch and I think we're going to be 40 days with rain now.
Yeah. But that's all right. It's filling up my water tank. I'm happy.
My kids are going camping. Yay!
Probably not, are they? They're going to
No.
go even in rain?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, they're
Oh.
hardcore. Okay, so actually, let's get on to the actual topic of the show.
Okay then.
How
Which-
can we sell more books with
Covers!
Yay!
Whoop, whoop. So we just thought we've talked about covers before. We all know about covers. We just wanted to sort of go through it again and just make sure that your covers that you have on your books are the best they possibly can be, and just make sure they've got everything that needs to be there, and that you're thinking about them in the way that you should be thinking about them. They're such an important part of our marketing for our books. Like one of the main ways that people are going to look at and get attracted to our books and want to read them, especially for when it's if you've already got a reader and they recognize your name, they're just going to buy your book. But if it's someone, a reader that's new to you, then this is an opportunity to show them that your book is exactly what they want to read, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
and I think operate on the premise that most readers are new to you. You know, if you've already got them, you've already got fans, great. But you actually want, there's millions, billions, in fact, of others potentially out there.
And you want a
Yeah.
lot of them. Maybe not
Yeah.
all, but as many as
Yeah.
you can get.
Yeah. So let's talk about what a cover should do. We've sort of already said, it's drawing in those new readers, but what else is that the only point of a cover? Like, what should a cover do?
Well, along with your blurb, I'd say that your cover is the most important marketing tool that you've got in your arsenal, as it were. And so it's, you've put all this time and effort into your book. So you've got to, I think, put not as much time, but you've got to put the same amount of, mental energy into your cover and blurb, of course, to really to sell that book, because this is what's going to sell your book initially, is your cover.
And I would say, like, a really important point to note is that in the same way that your blurb shouldn't be a synopsis of what happened in your story, your cover shouldn't be a synopsis of your main characters and what happens in the story. Like it's a marketing tool. It's not, this cover that you've dreamed of that you think is going to represent perfectly your two characters. It's like, what is going to draw the reader in? What is going to make them want to pick up your book?
And isn't that so true? Often when we're starting off writing, you have a really strong idea of what you want on the cover as the author. But I think the first point to remember is that the cover isn't actually for you as the author. It's for readers. So the two might not necessarily align. If you're so what's the word, wrapped up in the idea of having, all the different elements in the artwork, make it or have it made, but have that on your wall. That's not what's going to work on your cover. 99 times out of 100.
Yeah. So what are the elements of a good cover then?
So, well, what your cover should do, I think the first thing it should do is tell the potential reader what the genre is. I think you've got to really convey what genre it is. You wouldn't put a spaceship on the cover of a sweet small town romance, which I know everybody is like, obvious. But when you've got maybe a subgenre, like say shark shifters, then you want to have
Of
a
course,
shark.
shark.
We haven't had
we
him
all
for a
write
while,
shark
so
shifters,
Fair call.
Pickle.
Want to
Yeah,
have a shark on that cover with a usually I was going to say a bottomless man, but that's not the right term. You want to have a man torso with a shark and moon to indicate a shifter. Like there's these elements. Now, okay, that's a slightly extreme example. Feel free to use that if indeed you're writing shark shifters. But what with Wendy's Regencies, her Regency covers are Regency covers. They're not Middle Ages, with
Yeah.
with character models and Middle Ages costumes. So it's got to really convey the genre.
Oh, I have a question. What if you're someone who's written like this really unique novel and you want to like make sure that all the readers really understand that your book is completely different from any other book that's out there, and you want to have a really unique cover?
Well, I'd say bless your heart,
Write
as they
another
say
book.
here in the Southern Hemisphere. The-
To sell, you've got to fit. Look, the thing is, it's got to fit somewhere. If it's on
Yeah.
its own, who's going to find it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
know,
exactly.
bottom line is-
If you made a toothpaste that tastes like no other toothpaste, fundamentally it's still a toothpaste. So convey that it's a toothpaste first,
Yeah.
then through probably your blurb and other ways you can convey why it is a
It's
cinnamon
different,
flavored
yeah.
toothpaste and not
Yeah.
peppermint.
Yeah.
But it's
I
still
think you can get
fundamentally.
cinnamon flavored toothpaste just quietly.
Can you?
Yeah.
It would be
You
gross
can.
though, right? Like
It is gross.
ugh.
It is gross.
There's a
I get
reason
so-
that peppermint flavored toothpaste is the way forward.
That's the
I mean,
truth.
and the point
That is
is
the
right. If you want this unique cover and you want it, that's fine. Just what we are talking about is covers that are going to help you sell more books. So if you're on the understanding that you want this cover and it may or may not sell you the books that you need to, because you're not giving the readers an understanding of what's in your book, or that maybe it's not something that's popular, then but that's okay. If you understand that and make this other cover, more power to you. We're not saying you can't do that. It's just
Absolutely.
if you're in this game to make money, not a game, in this very serious pursuit to make money,
business. Yeah.
And gather readers to your book. It's not even maybe about making money. It's like you've just got to tell the readers what's in your book to let them know that it's a book that they're going to like reading. And
it's no good hinting several things.
No.
Because a reader won't get it. They won't think, well, it could be about that, or it could be about that. Yay, let me try it. That's not how it works.
That's it. And I think if the cover is confusing to the person looking at it, if they're confused about what genre is, what heat level it is, that's another thing that, particularly if you're writing romance, the degree of clothing on the cover usually indicates a heat level. And I'm absolutely putting a disclaimer out here, you don't want to have super naked people engaged in sexual acts on your cover, because you're not that's just not going to work for the
but added to
online
that
retailers.
you need to add, Shah, is that, and on a serious note, if you want to advertise that book and you've got
yes,
can I say nipple on here?
Yeah, no, you can say nipple.
If you've got nipple showing, chances are you're not going to be able to advertise that cover.
Nipple, side boob, the whole works.
Yeah, there's you've got to be incredibly careful with the positioning of the couple, because trust me, there's some books I can't, until I've had them recovered, actually advertise.
And you can even have, I've seen some romance authors, the couple has been fully clothed, but they're like horizontal.
Yeah.
And that it's bots that are going through this. It's not one person. And so they're using all their algorithms, and so you do have to be careful. But I think the most important thing to think, to answer the question, what do you need on a cover, first of all, is it's got to convey genre, and it's also
add a look,
and the look of the book, the tone.
but at a glance, it's got to convey genre, doesn't it?
Oh, and that's a very good point. Works in thumbnail too. I don't personally believe that the title has to be readable in thumbnail. In fact, most times it's not. But when you look at those, if you on your phone, if you look at the Kobo listings or the bookshelf or whatever, and you've got those tiny little, I don't know, maybe a centimeter, wide kind of covers, the good ones, you can tell exactly what genre those books are without even reading the title or anything else.
So how do we know that they convey the title? The genre, sorry.
I think font is a good one too.
Yeah, the
massive.
typography is super important. And there's trends. There's just with blurbs, in terms of what they are talking, convey the length, the rhythm. It's the same with covers, and it's like I said, okay, the shark shifter was a humorous take on it, but in all seriousness, if you're writing a shifter romance and there's elements on there that you need to convey that it's a shifter romance, and usually it's the animal that's involved in the shifter, there's a human, usually the male character, or or a couple, and there's the animal, like there's there's those sort of elements. For Rockstar Romance, you've got elements of like an audience or a musical, there's that kind of thing.
Think about like rom-coms are a good example, because there's a lot of those picture-y, how do you describe that, like not animated, like
the illustrated
covers, that's
Yeah.
the word I was looking for, and really bright, right? Because it's comedy, so you've got to show that it's a light-hearted, bright kind of breezy book versus dark romance, which is always going to be like really dark colors and maybe a bit of red and like you can really get the feel.
And ironically, with the dark and the super, super, super verging on erotic romance, those covers, they often are object covers, because you can't, as we talked about, have people, having sex on a cover. So if you've got sort of,
let's don't do that.
No, please don't do that.
Yeah, but please don't do that.
So I think the just like with your blurb, and just like with so much of this business, the way to look at this is to go and research. So how would we approach that?
But also, I just want to add, you've got to respect your readers, because here's the thing, these guys know what they're looking for.
Yes.
Hardcore readers know genre and they know what they're looking for. And if you think you're going to fool them by putting something on your cover that isn't related to your genre, they just bypass you, because they know what they want.
Or look out for your reviews.
Yeah, exactly.
If you try and pretend to be in a genre that you're not, like
exactly
putting a Regency style cover on a medieval book or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just you can't fool readers, and if you want to sell books, don't try.
So that's it. And I think actually a reader, if you said to them, what do you expect on a cover, they wouldn't necessarily be able to enunciate it, right? Like they wouldn't be able to say, oh well, I always know that they'll just, it's a matter of like there's something subconscious about it in the way of the reader. So they'll go, oh, that looks like a book I'd like, because it looks similar to those other ones that I've already read. And then they'll go to the blurb and they'll go, oh, and that's a trope I like, and oh, okay. And then maybe they'll think, oh, but this is a new author, but there's this thing that says it's like this other author that I like down the bottom of my blurb, or whatever, there's things in there that new to you readers are going to go through, maybe even subconsciously, before they'll buy the book, before they'll give you a chance. So
but it's the cover that usually is the signpost that brings them into their first of all. So you can write the best blurb in the world, but if you've got a sucky cover,
well, I think you say that like word of mouth is a beautiful thing too. Like,
no, I'm talking
so I've read
people
books
that don't
with,
know you at all.
Like I've read books with good terrible covers, but it's because I've heard from someone else that it's a good book, right?
But
so
you
that's
had to
not
be
what we're
extra
talking
sold
about.
on that book though, didn't you? If you had just been
if I just looked at the cover, I wouldn't have bought it. So if you want those new covers, I mean, and this is a good point, because I was listening to a talk by Bella Andre, I think it was at RWA years and years ago, so it was a long time ago, and she was talking about how she liked, and I don't even know if this is still the case, but she liked her name to be the biggest thing on the book, because as far as she was concerned, she was the brand, her name was the brand. And that if someone saw her name on the book, she wanted them to go, oh yeah, that's a Bella Andre book, I'm going to buy it because it's Bella Andre. And that's what an author, I think, at a certain level of their career can do, right? Like they are the thing that sells the book, their name, their kind of, the reader goes, oh yeah, I know that I love Bella Andre books. She always delivers on a certain thing. That's the thing that I like, and I'll buy it. And so she could kind of put a paper bag on the cover of her book, but as long as her name was there and you knew it was a Bella Andre book or a Lucy Score book or something like that has these big readerships, then awesome. But what we're kind of talking about is people who, when you're wanting to try and find readers who are new to you, and they are not going to be drawn in by your name being written big on the bottom of the cover. They're going to be drawn in by the feel and the tone of the cover. And so you need to be really looking at that and making sure that it matches other books in your genre.
Also how professional it looks as well too. And I think, there are always exceptions, and we've had, haven't we, authors on the podcast that are very adept at making their own covers. Often they come from a graphics or some kind of marketing background, so they've kind of got a head start on that. But and so we're not saying it's not possible, but for the majority, our advice would be to get a professionally designed cover, not necessarily custom designed. So that's where you work with a designer and you tell them what you want, and they give you, there's a back and forth conversation kind of thing. Often it involves filling in an online form with elements of your book. But there's also some really, really strong pre-mades out there, and they're covers that are already done, and then the designer will change it to put your own pen name on there, and they can work really well, and they're a lot more affordable as well. So and there's no rules, and in fact we often say that covers often are changed up every few years because
look
they
at
go
us.
through
We've
design
done that.
trends. We've all done it. And
I mean, that was something that we learned at RAM that Laurel and Page talked about, which it blew my mind actually, because growing up, you kind of think this is the book and this is its cover, like it's all very set in stone. And then she was like, oh no. If I feel like this cover has done its dash and sales are starting to slow, then I will change that cover and I will appeal to a different audience. And that was like, what? Like that's what you've got to. It's
which
a
is
marketing.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
You have this audience, you have your fans, you're quite famous, you have all these fans, but over here, these people don't know you.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
now suddenly you've piqued their interest.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, look at the Harry Potter books. How many changes have they gone through?
Exactly.
Probably
and
targeting the next level of kids coming up that are able
look
to
at the Bridgerton series. They've just been completely recovered, and they've been out since what?
20 something years.
And
So no, I mean, and and people are saying, well, that's great, but oh my goodness, the expense. And obviously if you're seeing some success, then it's a matter of reinvesting into your business again to get more readers, so success begets success. And this again, though, this is where a pre-made, for around maybe $100 to $80 to $100 is well worth trying. If you've got a series particularly that's floundering, I would say maybe look at, even if you can only do the first book in the series and you target your advertising to that first book, that can be a way of juicing things up again.
And I think also it's very important not to put too much on your cover. Don't overcrowd your cover with too many things, because chances are people aren't going to actually read it, and the thumbnail will just look crazy busy.
I think it's more about the symbolism. I remember Chris Fox talking to us about this. It's like, don't worry about whether the hero had blonde hair in your book and he's got black hair on the cover. Don't worry about whether she had long hair on your book and she's got short, whatever. She's got red hair, curly on the cover, and she's, it's actually the mood and the feel. And don't worry if there was a castle, or that the castle in your book didn't quite look like the castle that's being depicted in the back of your Regency room. It's not. This is not about depicting a exact scene from your book. This is about telling the reader what kind of book they're getting themselves into.
But also, don't worry about that reader that emails you and says that the cover model looks too young for your book.
You'll get that, but you know what?
You only get one or two pushbacks.
You get one or two. Just reminded me to, we will put a link in the show notes, but we had a very, very good podcast episode, and it was over a year ago now, probably even 2 years, but it's still absolutely valid today. And it was with Rebecca Haskell, who's a very talented cover designer, and it was really good. And she talked about contrast, so the contrast in a cover would be light and dark, because that's what people, that's what our human brains are naturally drawn to, is contrast. So you want high contrast covers as opposed to everything in the same sort of tonal range, which if you're a photographer, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's that kind of thing. And
added to that is colors. So if you've ever you can get like those blocks of like covers that are like the top 100. Who does that?
Kindle Trends.
So Nat, and you look at those and you can kind of like, for example, for urban fantasy, for me, I look at those covers and I can see that there's a really strong trend toward a particular color, like purple often is in there,
purpley bluey color, right?
Those kinds of colors. And there was a trend for a while there, and it was to do with a particular designer who was actually designing the majority of those books with glowing kind of pinks and purples and things like that. Like there was just, things like that are trends, or are. So like you think about Regency books, and I always think of those beautiful dresses. Like there's often like a really strong color for those dresses, like a really strong red or a really strong green, that the dress that they're wearing is kind of like takes over. And that's part of what I recognize as being Regency, or, you know, and just think to yourself what it is about those covers that kind of keep them similar. And
It's
then
an
trying
interesting one, because the purists would say, you know, they would never wear a bright yellow gown in Regency times, or a bright red
but it's
gown
not
in
about that,
Regency
right?
times.
Like it's
fiction,
about,
people.
Well, it's also, I mean, just a side note, because I was watching Pride and Prejudice 1995 version last night, and
As you do.
the color range in that, and yet compared to the remake of Emma with you know, just was it 2 years ago, and the bright colors in that, it was just such a contrast, and that works probably, I'd say, more for a modern audience. So
Well, it's like the Bridgerton series that's on Netflix. Totally different.
I mean, that and they've gone, what do they call it? Colorblind, where some of the characters are black who would never have been there, but it just kind of works.
they're also
because it's
using
that
in
modern
the
audience.
costumes, they're using things that would never have been
And
around. So imagine like I say, the purists will be pulling their hair out. But going back to maybe if we can call it the anatomy of a great cover, then you need obviously your author name, and I would say that needs to be more readable than your title, as in a bigger font. You want to use a different font, and the rule for design is no more than 2 fonts. So if you've got a straight up and down, what's called a sans serifs, no curly cues, you know, just nice clear line, linear looking cover font for your author name, yes, you can have the swirly, you know, curly font for if it fits your genre for your title, but you don't want then another one as well on there. It's you want to keep them really nice and crisp.
And it's more than that. It's like in some genres you have to have the sans serif font as the author name. Like, and it's like thrillers or mostly thrillers is the one that comes to mind. You know, they have that in that block letters, the author name, and then
almost like a movie poster kind of looking type font. You wouldn't have the type of font that you'd use for say a fun cozy mystery, where often they're sort of almost kind of cartoony looking kind of fonts. You wouldn't have that on a thriller. It would just be a complete mismatch. So I think that's really important. Like as Cheryl said right at the start, typography is usually the thing that sets apart a professionally designed cover from a amateur.
And then, but you talk about title being smaller and not as readable, but when you think about, for example, a Regency, sorry, it keeps popping into my head, but like the Duke who loved me or something, you know, like you have like having an aristocratic title in the title tells the reader that it's it's the same for cozies, don't you think, Cheryl? Like there's certain things that go in the title of cozies.
So that's a classic example of those differences. Say, for example, a contemporary romance, I don't think the title is nearly as important for that. You know, it's more about the images and usually the author name, thinking, you know, Bella Andre, for example. Whereas, like you say, your cozies, you've got the punny title, haven't you? You know, and that's super important. So this is where knowing your subgenre is really important. Like, you know, what weight does your subgenre give to the different elements?
Do you think, because cozy, for example, cozy mysteries, if we're going to talk about those, and there's the paranormal ones and the baking ones and whatever, knitting, craft ones. This is just occurring to me off the top of my head, so feel free to disagree with me. But do you think it's because... Oh yeah, I know. It's kind of like almost a newer genre that has come to the fore because of self-publishing, I think. Like it's become popular because it's something that people can self-publish more easily than before. That maybe those covers are kind of like this new wave of like, because they're so different from other covers. Like it's almost like they don't feel like they have to follow the old... No, Shah's making faces.
I don't think so. I think I was reading cozy mysteries well before self-publishing, and they tended to be that kind of
quirky, weird one.
But
I mean, they call Agatha Christie like cozy mysteries, right? Like those kinds of, and they would never have had like the fun, bright colours with the cupcakes on the cover.
Those days,
nothing.
but
this
is in the 30s.
Yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. I just think that those covers are so different from every other style and genre of cover. It just is like, I wonder why. Like, I wonder where that's
Well,
come from.
just looking at the latest Murder on the Orient Express, and the cover of that has changed. You know, that has evolved so much. And again, like you're saying, it's like what's happening now with covers in that genre. It is more quirky. It can actually be anything. It really can be anything, as long as it's pertaining to that subgenre, I guess. Like, you know, like food or animals or whatever.
Ghosts,
you know, but and then it's in the title, isn't it? Like murder or crime or, you know, blood or something like that pops up in the title, and you immediately know that it's a cozy mystery. You know, it's
exactly.
It is punny and it is quirky, as opposed to a normal mystery or a thriller where it's more intense and, you know, more, you know, trying to draw you in.
Grittier feel. That's it. The other things on there is, if you've got, for example, your We Say Today bestseller, you would have that on the cover as well. Again, it's probably not going to be readable in a thumbnail size, but it's still important to have it on there.
And a tagline, right? Like, no one saw it coming, but it was there anyway.
If appropriate for the cover, if appropriate for the subgenre. Not all of them need it, but you
I
know,
think
often
series
thrillers again.
Sometimes like a little series logo
or title,
and title and logo, like a little. I've got one on a few of mine, and it's a little logo, and I can't even remember the name of them. But it's got a little logo on each one, you know, with the series above it, and people are like, they know that logo, and they're like, oh, well, that's one of those.
Back in the day,
that's
you used
true.
to have the series name. You used to have the series name on the cover if you were allowed. If it was going to be listed as part of a series on Amazon. Is that still the case, that it has to be on the cover?
Don't know.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I mean, I always put it on there.
If you do that, it's easily more recognisable, and I think it ties in when you make it part of a series on Amazon. I don't know how it works with all the others, because I just do it now as a matter of course. But I mean, if you're not writing series, then it's
and that's actually a valid point about series. Is that the whole series should look like a one unit as well. Like if a really good example of that is Cheryl's cozies, and you can see them if you're watching the YouTube video, you can see them in behind her, and I'm just looking at them now, and you can clearly tell which books are part of which series, because the covers are you know, very similar, and they have that same branding on them, so that there's you know, there's the Cheryl Phipps or CA Phipps branding, but then there's also the series, there's the author branding, but there's also the series branding, and for that particular set of books, which I think is useful to readers as well.
The font's got to be the same, and like you say, it has to be recognisable in the graphic. You know, the graphic's not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar.
So talking of fonts, one thing that Wendy does, so she's got a number of different series as well, but her author font that is used for her Regency romances is often, not always, but often the same on different series, that same author font that's used for her name. And then the series have got their, you know, different looks and their different logos and all the names, obviously. But that's something else you can do for branding, is keep your, you know, author font consistent as well across them. And then the other thing I was going to just on my anatomy of a great cover on notes here is just the tones that are used. So like we're saying, for dark romance, often it's dark tones, often it's very, you know, high contrast, often black and white images sometimes. Cozy mysteries, you know, it's the opposite. It's the bright colors, it's the, you know, you might have a knife dripping with blood, but it's usually happy happy colors behind
As
the
happy
scenes.
as
It's true.
dripping in blood could be.
And so that can denote the tone of the book as well, is the actual the tonal range of the cover of the design is really conveys the tone of the book. For example, a small town romance that's sweet, you wouldn't have like super dark tones on that, because that would indicate something that's a little maybe more intense, or, you know, language or sexual, you know, levels and heat levels kind of thing. So I think you have to turn your reader hat on, and when you're looking through the bookstores online, look at those covers and you'll start getting an appreciation for what tone of the writing is, you know, to match those covers.
And that's a really good point, actually. Part of what I took from what you're saying is, don't have a dark romance cover if you've got a contemporary romance book, or maybe vice versa as well, because there's reader expectations for that book. I mean, you could have the most beautiful cover in the world, it could look amazing, but if it doesn't actually indicate the tone and style of your book, it's going to do you a disservice. It's not going to work for you. Readers are going to go, I thought this was dark romance and there was no sex in it. Like, and
I won't be buying the next book.
No one kidnapped anyone, you know, like where's the kidnapping and the mean men, like
nice.
whatever.
Nice, nothing like a nice wholesome read, eh?
Yeah. But you know, no, many people love dark romance.
I know, I do too. Yeah.
I think it's quite fascinating though in the genre of women's fiction, how diverse those covers can be. You know, it's not like one size fits all in that genre. It can be just a picture of, you know, like a garden scene, or it can be couples, but you know, then it can just be illustrated or just words and, you know, some flowers or something intertwining between the words. It can be so many things. And
it's actually a fine line to walk, especially like small town, which is what I write. You know, there's a small town sexy stuff, and then there's a small town that's not quite so sexy, and then there's a sweet small town. It's like there's quite a lot of elements going in there that you look at a cover and you think, what's that one? You know, it's quite hard. So you've really got to do your research.
I think it depends who you want to be aligned with, right?
Yeah.
So some really big names, or just books that you really, really like.
Yeah.
And I think we were going to talk about that earlier, weren't we, about going onto Amazon or Apple or Kobo or whatever, and looking at the top books in that genre and seeing where you think your book would be aligned. And that will give you a few choices, I think, but at least it will lead you down the right path to getting the font right and, you know, that sort of thing.
So moving on, we've had a little checklist here what we're going to talk about, and it was what don't you need on a cover. And Wendy's already talked to this, like you don't need everything, including the kitchen sink on there, or every little plot point. You don't, you know, I know this is going to shock people again to reiterate, you don't need the hair colors to be matching. It's nice if they can, and usually with the power of Photoshop, you know, you can do. Or you can do what they call head swaps, where if you like a particular stock model, you know, you can use their head on a different body, that kind of thing. Side note for the new authors, it's okay to reuse stock images. Like you'll see that couple or that model, you know, singular, on other covers as well. So it's just a fact of life. It happens in traditional publishing as well. I've seen a number lately of Harlequin category romance covers coming out with, and I know jolly well that stock image is just what I saw in, you know, deposit photos kind of thing. It's okay. It's kind of an accepted thing, and usually a good designer will be able to twist it a little bit in terms of they'll be able to maybe change out their hair color, or change out their the clothing color, like recolor the shirt to a different color kind of thing. So that's okay. You will occasionally get readers emailing you saying so and so's stolen your cover, and what they usually are referring to is that I've seen that stock, you know. I mean, there's a particular guy, and I can't think of his name, what he's called amongst the author community, and he at one point, probably about 5 years ago, it felt like he was on every single paranormal romance cover, every single one. He had really intense blue eyes and black dark hair, and I swear that guy, he must have had a busy life, because he was in 200 books.
like Fabio in the old Mills and Boons days.
Exactly.
So what are the can I just ask you, Shah, so we want to talk quickly about copyright in terms of, so you need to make sure that you're paying for your photos, because photos will never generally be free.
It's a real thing. What don't you need on a cover is something that you've got off Google images. You've absolutely got to have the correct licensing for that. So you buy from if you're going to make your own covers, you buy from a reputable stock image site that provides the correct licensing. And if you're buying from a designer, then they will be you know,
buying that image for on your behalf.
yeah. So you need to again make sure that's, and usually for the good designers, they will actually have like information on their website about how they're licensed, who they buy their photos from. Often it's deposit photos or Shutterstock or iStock, you know, those kind of things, period images, you know, the more specialty ones. So that's really important, really, really important. If you want to use your own photo, then go for it. But I would, you know, that's in the realm of designing your own book. So yeah,
It better be good quality.
yeah, no, you need to be a photographer to be doing that, you know.
You want to know what you're doing. You want to know you understand your
Yeah.
genre really well. You want to, you know, it's a lot of work to design your covers, and it's just
Yeah.
work that's taking you away from writing. So
one of the other things that I've seen is, so it sounds contradictory in that we say that a self-published book has to be as good as a traditionally published book in terms of the cover image, that, you know, there should be, you shouldn't look at one and say, oh, that's homemade and the other one's not. But equally, I think it's important to remember that usually, in still these days, traditional publishing is still the print model. Usually, that's where they're aiming for. So, not all traditionally published books are necessarily, their covers are necessarily designed for the ebook market. So, I think that's just a rider in there. If you're, as Cheryl was saying before, looking at the authors that you want to be on the shelf with, if you like, and they're all traditionally published, their covers aren't necessarily going to be the right cover for you, just saying, or a similar style.
and I think there's also, you've got to watch copying the big names as well.
Yes.
And we're not copying, we're getting inspiration from, sorry, I shouldn't say copy. Because like I was saying with Bella before, it's like someone like Nora Roberts again could put anything on her cover and her name would sell the book, right? Like,
and interestingly, if you look at Nora Roberts's romance, often they have like a scene, like it's often a landscape photo kind of thing, isn't it? You know,
which totally wouldn't sell a book to me normally. Yeah.
No. Yeah, there we go. Cheryl's holding up.
But it's because you know it's a Nora
Priceless.
Roberts, Nora Roberts book. You kind of go, oh, I'll buy it for Nora, and it's so that's kind of, again. So make sure that you're looking at the right books. I mean, I just think,
look at the top indie self-published authors.
I was just going to say that, like, look at the indies, because
Yeah,
I think you can you take yourself down the wrong track looking at the trade pub. I'm just thinking like Sarah Maas, whatever her name is, and like, people buy her books for her name, and I mean, she has cool covers anyway, but if you tried to put a cover out exactly like hers, I'm not sure that would tell people that it's you know, like, it's not
got to be you've got to have individuality, a touch of your own in there as well, but it's got to be fit that genre, right?
So
I wouldn't copy exactly the same as another author. I remember Janie Crouch had problems with that. Like, she had this certain style, certain look that she had for her books, and then people literally copied it exactly and were copying her blurbs almost exactly, like word for word. Like, and that's not cool. Don't do that. It's not what we're saying at all. We're saying take the style.
And fundamentally, it's not serving you, because you are not writing a Janie Crouch book, you know, so you're only going to get disappointed people. And frankly, you know, may 1,000 fleas infest your armpits, because
you don't need it. You don't know.
As we're saying, when we're talking about copying things or looking at things, we're talking about, as Trudy says, inspiration here, like looking at the elements, the common elements. If you look at movie posters, for example, there's a real trend, like with a Gone Girl kind of movie poster. Often they will use a teal to orange kind of gradient overlay, and once you see it, you can't not see it. And you look at all of these movie posters, and they sort of came out, but they're all different. But once you start looking for the commonality, it's like the overarching kind of common elements.
So perhaps it's not just one book, but maybe you're looking at the commonalities across the top 10, top 50.
Absolutely.
So that it can be recognizable, but you're not literally copying one other author's exact book. Kind of.
Don't do that. Do not do that.
No, that's a nada.
But sometimes a designer, if you're going to a designer, they'll say, well, what do you like? So you look at their site if they've got examples, or, you know, you could maybe give them 4 or 5 books, say, well, mine would fit this tone. This is, you know, I'm writing this level of heat, or I'm writing this, you know, I've got a thriller with, you know, a woman on a train. So these are the kind of books that
Yeah.
I'm like. Um,
And that's good. That gives them context, right?
Yeah.
Like, that gives them, and it'd be like, I'm writing a sci-fi on a planet and there's spaceships. You know, that's the level of information that a
Some
designer
cover
needs.
designers will actually send you out a form to fill out,
Yeah.
yes.
and
Yeah.
it'll be
And
like
that's quite helpful.
questions, put in
I
what you
have-
like,
I-
and send
I
a couple
almost-
of through.
I almost don't think that the designer doesn't need to know every single little thing that happens in your
No.
book.
And
in
they
fact, I
certainly
think that's
don't need to
confusing.
read the book either. That's another common sort of misconception I've heard, that, you know, how can somebody do the cover if they haven't read the book? They haven't got time to read a book
No.
every.
No,
They usually
half
know
a
what they're
day.
doing. If they're good ones,
You-
and
they
If
don't
you
need
give
to read the
them-
book.
You need to communicate effectively or clearly what your book is, right? Like, you need to know the
Yeah.
genre, you need to know the mood or the tone, you need to know, like, if it's a romance, the heat level, you need to know the genre, subgenre, you know, all those kinds of information, and that, you know, who's on the cover, what you want on the cover. Like, I mean, a good designer should hopefully be aware of, and these, you know, maybe they just do romance, and they would maybe know and be aware of that, you know, one person, male or female, versus a couple on the cover, and what does better. But actually, maybe that's something that you should be researching first, so you know that in your genre within romance, the covers that have just one man chest and nothing else on the cover with bright pink text, and that's not actually a suggestion, that's just me making stuff up, but those are the ones that do best, and that's the kind of thing that you
Yeah.
want from your, you know, like, you should know that maybe, and
I
then
think
you can
Definitely.
tell your
Mhm.
cover designer that that's what you're expecting. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
So
that sort of
that's
covers
sort
it
of
off.
on-
Eh?
That's on to our thing of how to get a fantastic cover. So another thing is, in terms of price expectations, I would say around 150 to 500 for a custom designed cover, and it can go up from that if you're in fantasy. Fantasy is a whole another
Yeah.
ball game in terms of, it's usually original art, and often the cover designer takes the original art that you've already purchased and put it, you know, and done the typography. So it's, you know, it's a, you know, yeah, that's a different beast. But in terms of, you know, a good quality cover, sort of around the 250 mark, would you say, US dollars for,
Or more. I mean, you
Or
can easily
more.
pay more than that. Yeah.
Even lately, pre-mades have been going up as well. So and I think we're talking US, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
So-
US dollars.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's an absolute investment. So,
Mm.
you know, you've got to know what you want, and
Mm.
know
And I
what's
think
going to work for you.
if you feel like you can't afford that, I think it would be worth your while, especially if you're starting out, to try and save up a little for that. Like, to know, it's the same with the editing. It's like, you go, oh, I can't afford to edit, and I can't afford, so I'm going to do it all myself. It's like, well, that's cool, and you can totally do that, but don't expect your book to be a blockbuster seller out of the gates. You know, it's you need to have a beautiful genre relevant cover on your book, and it really well edited, to have a chance of selling all the books that we all kind of hope to sell.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
One of the questions I often see on author forums for newer writer or newer self-publishers is, should I go to Fiverr? And my general answer to that is no. If it's, you know, if they're selling a cover for $30, often it doesn't come with, you know, correctly purchased stock images, should we say. But there are the occasional Fiverr designer. This is where asking in author forums can really help. There's one called that I've seen recommended a lot, and she goes by, I think it's German Creative on Fiverr. I've seen her recommended a lot. But, you know, in order to be, covers have gone up, you know, and the top designers, if you like, are often booked out months, if not a year ahead. And so, you know, you do have to start thinking about this sort of fairly early on in the piece. But
some
I think
writers
asking around is the way to do it.
Yeah.
As some writers, and I'm not looking at anyone in particular, Cheryl, like buy the covers before they've even written the book, and use the covers as inspiration for the actual book.
Very good
I
writers.
think they worked out all right.
Yeah. I'm saying that's a perfectly reasonable.
It's a really smart way to do it. And
and where did you find them, Cher? Like, how did you go and find those covers?
I belong to some Facebook groups that are for pre-mades, and I just wait, and I think with the last lot, maybe not these ones, but another one that I'm just starting, I think it was such a good deal that I just bought them. I actually have about 3 sets just sitting there waiting for the stories, because they were just such good stories, just such good covers, that I just straight away envisaged what the stories would be. Like,
That's awesome.
Like all the stories.
Yeah.
So
it's so cool. And they were sold as a set, weren't they?
They're sold as a set, and you can change the titles if you want to. I think you could potentially change the font, but some won't. Obviously, your name goes on there and any subtitle. But yeah, pretty much what you see is what you get.
And I do the same thing. I follow cover designers on Facebook, and sometimes they'll do things like they'll have designed something, and they'll do or they've designed too much stuff, and they'll just do a quick sale. So you can get them in all sorts of environments, and that, in these groups. So have a look out on Facebook for cover designers that design in your genre. Often it's a single genre.
And often they'll be credited, won't they? Often authors will credit their cover designer in the front of their books too, in the acknowledgements. So that's another way of checking it out.
If you're going to
some
credit
won't,
them anywhere,
because they don't want to share their designer.
But
because then they get really busy.
There is that.
There is that, but I also think it's fair. If they've done a good job for you, that's your way of paying them back, especially for somebody like me who's got what I think a really good price for them. Then
absolutely,
that's
so I think research is super important, and it's a fun part of research. This is a funsy part of research,
absolutely, 100%.
Final advice from covers, what would we say?
Do your
research.
Do your research and know exactly what it's supposed to be, and go get it.
And therefore readers are not for you. I would say too.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So where can we be found if someone wants to find out more information about us or our covers?
Fabulous podcast. Yay! And come and see us on YouTube.
Come check us out on YouTube, and you can see particularly Cheryl's got her fantastic covers behind her head on her wall.
Wendy's are there, but you can't quite see them.
But they're a bit further away. Trudy's got to up her game and get her covers in a picture behind her.
So I've got books. I've got some books behind me.
And a huge whiteboard like your wall.
I know. Look at that. That's me planning the next series on my whiteboard wall.
Whiteboard wall. My goodness. So this is the kind of amazing stuff that you can see on YouTube. So thank you to
get in there.
400 people. Our goal, please make this happen for us. Our goal for February is to get 500 subscribers on YouTube, and we will love you immensely if you were to go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We already do, but we'll love you even more, just saying. So
all right,
please come along.
Sounds good.
Wendy wants to leave, so she's wrapping us up. Wendy's not
next week.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. We'll see you all, and you'll hear from us again next week. But for now, fare thee well.
Bye.
Bye.